I want you to imagine a world where satellites are as common as smartphones and where the nation that builds and launches them fastest sets the rules of engagement in data, defense, and diplomacy. Just a few years ago, India had no private rockets and export-grade satellite makers were virtually unknown. Today, Indian space startups are rewriting that script, sending payloads to orbit for a fraction of the cost of Western competitors, forging international contracts, and even eyeing deep space missions. This story begins with an extraordinary legacy. For decades, ISRO mastered low-cost, reliable launches, what the world called rocket science on a shoestring. The 2014 Mars Orbiter mission stunned NASA by reaching Mars on a budget under $75 million. But ISRO's true gift to India's private sector was not just technical know-how, it was confidence. The knowledge that complex space projects could be built, tested, and flown from Indian soil. Enter Skyroot Aerospace. In November 2022, they ignited Vikram I, the first privately designed and built rocket from India, riding on that ISRO blueprint but innovating in materials, engines, and streamlined processes. Skyroot's success shattered the glass ceiling. If a startup could orbit with homegrown technology, then the market for small satellites and rideshare missions would open wide. Not far behind is Agnikul Cosmos, turning heads with its single-engine mobile launcher design. By mounting their engine on a truck platform, they proved that launch pads need not be permanent, expensive complexes. And by fine-tuning thrust vector controls, they've shown precise orbital insertion is within reach of agile teams. But rockets are only half the story. Companies like Pixxel are building hyperspectral imaging satellites, tiny birds that scan Earth's surface in unprecedented detail, feeding climate science, agriculture, and national security. NewSpace focuses on satellite buses and in-orbit repairs, creating a maintenance economy that could extend satellite lifespans and reduce debris. Together, these startups are transforming India into a new space powerhouse. Foreign customers, from European research institutes to Middle Eastern defense agencies, are signing MOUs because they see reliability at a compelling price. The rupee-dollar dynamic means Indian launch rates undercut Western bids by 30–40%. And with the government of India's PLI for aerospace incentives and liberalized FDI caps, capital is flowing into space ventures like never before. So why is this a geopolitical game changer? Because whoever controls space infrastructure, communications, surveillance, navigation holds critical leverage. Data streams crisscross the globe, satellites track ships, crops, and conflicts, broadband constellations promise to connect billions. India's rise in this domain means New Delhi isn't just a consumer of space services, it's a provider, a standard setter, and a partner superpowers now court for secure, diversified supply chains in orbit. In the next segment, we'll dive deeper into India's policy ecosystem and talent pool, how a skilled workforce of engineers, scientists, and entrepreneurs is being unleashed by regulatory rockets of its own. I'd like you to picture a young engineer in Bengaluru, fresh from one of India's top aerospace programs, sketching rocket nozzles on her tablet as she sips chai. She knows she can stay in India and play a leading role in cutting-edge space projects because the cost structure here makes moonshots possible on a startup budget. India's first unique edge is economics. Thanks to the rupee-dollar exchange and decades of ISRO's cost optimization ethos, launching a small satellite from India can cost 30–40% less than in the US or Europe. Consider this: a rideshare slot on a US rocket might fetch $100,000 per kilogram. An Indian launch provider, leveraging local supply chains and lean operations, can undercut that by tens of thousands. That price gap transforms feasibility. A climate monitoring startup can now deploy a constellation of dozens of tiny sensors for the cost of a single satellite launch abroad. But economics are nothing without policy backing. In recent years, India's space sector has enjoyed a regulatory renaissance. The Space Activities Bill, now moving through Parliament, will grant private companies primary ownership of their launch vehicles and satellites, a dramatic shift from the old model where ISRO held all the cards. Under the PLI for aerospace incentives, manufacturers receive subsidies on domestic production, driving down component costs further. And with FDI caps liberalized to 74% in space ventures, foreign investors are pouring capital into homegrown rocket firms and satellite fab labs. Then there's Startup India's rocket fuel for entrepreneurs. Special space parks have been approved in Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu, offering testing facilities, pad access, and even dedicated assembly bays at subsidized rates. These parks cut through red tape, environmental clearances, range safety certifications, and spectrum licenses now follow a fast-track process. A small team can go from maiden engine test to suborbital flight in under 18 months, an agility that even Silicon Valley envy is starting to acknowledge. The final and perhaps most sustainable advantage is human capital. India produces the world's largest pool of STEM graduates annually, and a significant percentage of them already work for global aerospace giants or in Silicon Valley. Now many are returning home, drawn by the promise of building rockets that bear Indian names. This reverse brain drain fuels a culture of innovation. Rocket engine designs in Chennai draw on US lab techniques, satellite avionics in Hyderabad, integrate German sensor modules, and manufacturing workflows in Pune mimic Japanese Kaizen principles. Crucially, these engineers and technicians aren't isolated in ivory towers. Collaboration thrives in hackathons, developer meetups, and accelerator programs sponsored by the Department of Space. At one recent Space Tech Fest in New Delhi, teams from across the country pitched reusable stage concepts alongside AI-powered ground station software, all in the spirit of co-creation. ISRO mentors share decommissioned booster hardware for student projects. Founders trade war stories and lessons learned in WhatsApp groups at all hours. This ecosystem mindset, rare even in mature space nations, accelerates problem solving and inspires the next generation to aim even higher. All of these factors, economic efficiency, enabling policies, and a vibrant talent pool, create a virtuous cycle. Lower launch costs attract more satellites generate revenue for data analytics firms, more revenue persuades regulators to streamline rules further, and more streamlined rules invite fresh investment and talent. In under 5 years, this cycle has gone from concept to reality, lifting India from a largely government-run arena into a thriving new space marketplace. And it's not just domestic players who notice. NASA's Commercial Crew program has begun discussions with Indian launch providers for backup slots. The European Space Agency funded a joint startup to deploy climate data CubeSats from Indian soil. The UAE Space Agency inked a deal with Skyroot for lunar lander technology. Even private asteroid mining ventures are exploring rideshare options on Indian rockets drawn by the combination of reliability, cost, and policy certainty. In short, India's space startup boom is built on three pillars: the affordability born of ISRO's legacy, the visionary reforms unlocking private ownership, and the relentless energy of thousands of engineers, scientists, and entrepreneurs. Together, they are not just launching satellites, they are propelling India into a future where space is both a commercial marketplace and a geopolitical arena. Skyroot Aerospace, founded in 2018 by former ISRO engineers, Skyroot made history in November 2022 with Vikram I, India's first privately developed orbital rocket. What set Skyroot apart was its fully 3D printed cryogenic engine, an approach that slashed production time from months to just weeks. By adopting aerospace-grade additive manufacturing, they achieved a weight reduction of nearly 20%, directly translating into higher payload capacity and lower cost per kilogram. Skyroot's roadmap now includes Vikram I and Vikram I, aimed at lofting 500 Kogshan and 1,500 Kogshan payloads respectively, capabilities that position India's private sector to serve both commercial and defense clients. Agnikul Cosmos. If Skyroot proved that private orbital launch was possible, Agnikul demonstrated that launch infrastructure could be reinvented. Their flagship Agniban rocket features a single modular engine that can be configured for different missions. Even more disruptive is their mobile launch pad concept. A 120-ton truck transforms in hours into a fully operational launch vehicle base, eliminating the need for expensive fixed launch complexes. In May 2023, Agnikul debated a successful suborbital test, firing all four engines simultaneously, a milestone that caught the attention of space agencies in Europe and the Middle East exploring rapid response launch options. Pixxel. While rockets grab headlines, Pixxel is charting a different frontier: hyperspectral Earth observation. Launched in 2021, their Dove-class satellites capture imagery across hundreds of spectral bands, enabling precise monitoring of crop health, water quality, and natural disasters. In early 2024, Pixxel's Shakuntala constellation entered service, delivering near real-time data to agribusinesses in India's Punjab region, helping farmers optimize yields and reduce fertilizer use. With partnerships already signed in Brazil and South Africa, Pixxel is transforming how the world sees Earth and proving that Indian startups can lead the global geospatial data market. Dhruva Space, India's first end-to-end private satellite company, Dhruva Space focuses on both manufacturing satellite buses and providing in-orbit services. Their modular Oceanus platform can accommodate payloads from 20 Kogshan to 200 Kogshan, and their service-as-service model offers on-orbit diagnostics, refueling, and deorbiting solutions, critical capabilities in an era of increasing space debris. In late 2023, Dhruva Oceanus 1 successfully demonstrated active debris removal tether deployment, earning contracts from Japan's space agency to clear defunct satellites from sun-synchronous orbits. Others to watch: Bellatrix Aerospace, developing green propellant thrusters and aiming for deep space CubeSat missions by 2026. Team Indus, pivoting from lunar-landed ambitions to lunar resource prospecting technologies for commercial partners. Space Kids India, engaging students nationwide with DIY microsatellite kits and educational launch demos to cultivate the next generation of space innovators. Each of these companies exemplifies a key aspect of India's space startup boom: ingenuity, agility, and collaboration. They share facilities in the new aerospace parks, attend the same incubator programs, and frequently spin off cross-company partnerships mirroring the dynamic clusters seen in Silicon Valley but driven by rocket scientists and satellite engineers. What unites them all is a common vision to make India the go-to hub for affordable, reliable space services. And the results speak for themselves. Private launches jumped from 0 in 2019 to over 15 in 2024, while satellite manufacturing capacity has tripled just in the last 2 years. India's space startups aren't operating in a vacuum. They're forging alliances and competing on the world stage against established players like SpaceX, Rocket Lab, and emerging Chinese ventures. Here's how NASA and U.S. collaboration backup launch services. NASA's Commercial Resupply Services program has begun discussions with Skyroot Aerospace for potential rideshare slots on Vikram series rockets, offering American CubeSat developers lower-cost alternatives. Technical exchange. Agnikul engineers participated in joint workshops at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center, sharing their modular launch pad design insights and learning cryogenic handling best practices. European Space Agency (ESA) ties hyperspectral missions. Pixxel secured an ESA grant to integrate European spectral calibration standards onto its Shakuntala satellites, ensuring data compatibility for cross-continental environmental monitoring. Green propulsion research. Bellatrix Aerospace partnered with France's CNES on green propellant thruster development, aiming for ESA-endorsed test flights by 2026. Middle East and Africa engagement. UAE's MBRC partnership. The Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center inked in Mo with both Skyroot and NewSpace to co-develop lunar lander technologies and debris removal demonstrations, signaling trust in Indian engineering. African data hubs. Pixxel and local governments in Kenya and Nigeria launched pilot programs using hyperspectral data for agricultural planning and disaster response under India's Grow Africa Tech Diplomacy umbrella. Competitive edge over China. Cost and compliance. Unlike some Belt and Road-funded Chinese satellites tied to debt and opaque operations, Indian startups offer transparent pay-as-you-go contracts and rigorous ITAR-compliant data security. Geopolitical balance. Western and global South nations view Indian providers as politically neutral alternatives free from the geopolitical strings attached to Chinese state-backed entities. Private sector investors. Global venture capital. Sequoia India, Bloom Ventures, and Lightspeed have led multi-million-dollar funding rounds into Agnikul, Skyroot, and Pixxel, drawing in additional investment from U.S. and Middle Eastern sovereign wealth funds. Corporate partnerships. Airbus Defence and Space signed a strategic alliance with NewSpace for servicing small satellites, blending European manufacturing standards with Indian cost efficiency. These partnerships and competitions underscore a pivotal shift. India's NewSpace ecosystem is no longer an aspirational project, it's a trusted node in global space infrastructure. Superpowers and emerging nations alike are viewing India as a reliable partner for their orbital ambitions. Future vision and call to action. As we look toward 2030, imagine India hosting dozens of routine launches each month, operating a constellation of indigenous small satellites for broadband Earth observation and defense. Picture joint lunar missions with the UAE, Mars sample return studies with NASA, and an Indian deep space network tracking missions from Japan to Europe. For India, this means soft power augmentation, strengthening its diplomatic reach through space partnerships and tech diplomacy. Economic growth. A projected $10 billion new space industry by 2030, creating hundreds of thousands of high-skilled jobs. Defense readiness. Indigenous satellites and launch vehicles providing secure sovereign ISR intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. Your role as a viewer. Share this video to showcase India's ascent in space tech. comment below which startup fascinates you most: Skyroot's rockets, Agnikul's mobile launch pads, or Pixxel's data satellites. Subscribe and ring the bell for more high-stakes analyses of how India is reshaping global power from Earth to orbit. India's space startup boom isn't just a national story, it's a global game-changer. And as the next frontier of geopolitics unfolds, New Delhi is launching not only rockets but a new era of international collaboration and strategic influence. Thank you for watching Geo Post, where we decode the world's power dynamics one bold innovation at a time.